the mayor's here, waiting on Clay.
Oh, sure.
Now we're live. I didn't mean that, Clay.
We're live. Thank you.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can we start with a roll call, please?
Yes. LeBlanc,
Here.
Fenton,
Here.
Denham, Yancey,
Here.
Meenan,
Here.
McConnell, Milton,
Here.
Stepp.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll start the meeting with approval of the Finance Committee minutes. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Next, we have our city investment presentation, and that will be led by Ben.
If you don't mind, Mayor, I've got something kind of exciting I want to show you. Chad's got a hard stop at 10:30. I was going to do it at the end of the meeting. But we just inked a deal with ClearGov, which is a transparency website. And we've got your budget manager who works for me on the job to get that live and going. What I'd like to do is have Chad just show you, give you a few minutes about what that might look like
That'd be great.
for Branson, so you know what's coming down the road.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. So I think as everyone knows here, we've been looking at a new ERP platform for a number of months now. It's certainly a priority for our city to modernize our operation software and how we conduct business. And so, we've went through that process. I'm happy to say that we'll be bringing you a contract before the board by the end of the month. And so we're excited about that. However, as we talked about in our retreat and at times afterwards, even after you sign a deal with one of these companies, they're so, sorry, I'm distracted by what happened there. They're so backed up that, it could be many months before we can kick that project off. And certainly transparency with our community, with our citizens and the public, and obviously with the board is something that we take seriously, and it's an initiative that we've heard you loud and clear, and we're looking for ways every single day to increase that. We have an exciting capital improvements dashboard that we're launching very soon that I can certainly demo that as well when that's ready. In the meantime, we said we have a need that we need to fill, and we don't want to wait months and months or even a year before we can stand up a new ERP platform. And so we went to the market and we looked at options, and ClearGov rose to the top in terms of a product that we could stand up in a relatively quick fashion. I don't want to speak for Ben in terms of a timeline, but I think 60 to 90 days is a fair timeline for how long it's going to take us to stand this up. And ultimately, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's to make our finances transparent and get it out there in an easy to digest and easy to understand way for everyone. And so this example is a customer of ClearGov's. It's Cass County, and as you can see, there's items at the top here. You can look at their revenues, their expenditures, their demographics, the projects they have in the works, and we'll go through this very, very briefly. Again, this is going to be a quick and dirty overview. We're not going to go in depth here. But you can see their financial overview for their revenues and expenditures. When you enter our data into the system, it automatically generates these interactive reports and interactive maps and things like that. So you can even click on this for a breakdown of absolutely everything in terms of transfers in, transfers out, their sales taxes, their property taxes, et cetera, obviously their county. If you come back, come back out here. Again, you can break down everything on their expenses as well. It's all in an easy to understand and interactive bar graph in this example. You can modify that as an option for pie charts and things like that. So you can look at the data in various ways to make it easier to digest and understand. In their case, there's an open checkbook option as well. The demographics are automatically input, so you can see what the demographics of the community are. Their debt is out there. Again, it's transparent for everyone to see. You can look at it by fund as well. You can track it over many years. Again, in this example, it's their Justice Center funding. You can see principal versus interest, which is interesting. Again, I'm just showing you a few examples here. Here's a pie chart of their financials. You can download the financials up here. If you want to see that in Excel and work with it yourself, you can certainly do that. Again, this is the same information in a bar chart and a mountain chart. So as you highlight over these, you can see the specific numbers pop right up. And again, one of the things that intrigued us about this system is it's quick to set up. It's pre-designed to be easy to use. I think almost anyone can come in here and understand this information and digest it. Again, same thing with their expenditures. They've chosen to list all their projects out here, so you can find information on those. And again, we talked about their debt. The other thing this will do, which, let me see if I can find the link for that just real quick. Once we go through the budget process and we input all the information into this, I don't know how many hours finance spends creating the digital budget magazine that we have to, again, to get this information out to the public in an easy to understand way. How many, ballpark months, I'm told months they spend on this. Once you input that information into the system, it generates that for you. And that is a GFOA, is that right?
Yeah.
It's GFOA certified? Is that the terminology?
It's a budget award that the city's gotten for years and years and years.
So it meets those standards automatically.
Yeah.
So you're saving weeks and weeks and months of work by an individual just by choosing to utilize the system.
And that budget award is based on transparency and ease of the book to use or to read. Some of them are 185 pages, the other ones are 500 pages. And Sunday does the yeoman's work of actually assembling that. We feed her the data and then she assembles it all. And I can tell you that this product's going to pay for itself just by streamlining all of that up front. And we've got staff back in my office that right now are assigned to standing this up and getting the data we've already got out of the system into that system and then putting together a process to keep it updated. That way we're not putting more burden on the finance shoulders.
And this is just a quick example of the budget book that they've put together with this platform. You can see with just a few clicks their strategic plans, their priorities and issues, changes in personnel, the factors that they're up against with their budgeting, things like that, all their fund summaries, the various departments. And again, you can highlight over this and all the information's right there for you to see. Questions, comments?
I just looked at Pam and said, hey, that's pretty cool. It's, I think, obviously we look at this every month and even sometimes for us, it's hard to,
Yeah.
you don't have like for me,
yeah.
not having a financial background, sometimes it's hard to unpack all this. And so, just what I'm seeing in this brief presentation, it's very easy to follow and looks like it breaks it down in kind of an intuitive way. So I think it's really cool.
As our banker representative, Pam, what do you think?
I think it's great. It looks like it'll be very user-friendly, which I think ultimately is what we want, right? For any person in our city at any given time to be able to go out and access that, and it's put in such a format that it's easy to understand, so.
Even the mayor could understand it.
morning. Any comments?
Just a comment, is this just solely gonna be for the financial, balance of the city, or could it do more like kind of hybridize the current city website to this? So that way it's a one-stop shop for the citizens to look at job openings or budget review meetings or things of that nature.
Yeah, so this'll live out on our website. I say our,
Correct.
the city's website. So you'll have a choice of going into your job opportunities or the financials, right? And they could be side by side as far as, depending on how we set up the website, you just get a list of questions. I want to know what's been spent, and right above that could be, I want to know what jobs are opening. You just click on either one of those and this will pop up. So
And this is
it'll be out there.
Yeah, sorry to
Go
cut you
ahead.
off there. but This is customizable as well, and yes, we can embed it into our website, so you don't know, you don't have to go out to a separate website or remember to go to a separate domain to look up Branson's information. It's right there on our website, it's transparent, it's easy to access, and we can customize it. This is how they've chosen to display their information, and we can do it, in ways that meets our needs.
I'm extremely impressed. We use the word transparency, and this is an excellent example of being transparent. It shows the big picture very easily, it's intuitive. Every taxpayer will be able to see live where every single tax dollar is being spent and where all the revenues are coming from in a very easy format. So it'd be like somebody sitting at home or in their business, and they could basically be sitting in our finance department, getting all the questions that they want answered. That is just amazing.
This is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, this
There's
is
a
the
lot more in there.
appetizer for what's to come. And we're very, very excited to get these projects off the ground. I
The nice
think,
thing about the way we're using technology, it's going to streamline a lot of the paper processes we already do. If you can imagine, instead of producing this book to come to you guys with the financials, I just pull this thing up and we start going through the same data. So that way, when you go home or you have a constituent saying, hey, where do I find this? You already know, you've seen it. And we can go through that. Instead of having these dashboards, it'll already be up there. And you imagine the time savings that has just on staff, and it's there. The data's as good as the site is as good as the data that's loaded into it, right? So that process still needs to be mapped out. But we've got some excited folks back in Kansas City to use this. We've been talking to these guys for a long time.
You know, we talk about moving at the speed of business. Chad, I know you said it's taking months and they're all backed up, but as I recall, just a year ago, each department was using an Excel spreadsheet, right? Entering their own data, trying to keep up.
Yeah.
That is just phenomenal, phenomenal. Thank you very much, Chad. I know you
Thank
put
you.
a
And-
lot of work into this.
well, we put a lot of work into selecting some things and vetting things, but, I want to be very clear. The Baker Tilly and the finance staff are who's standing this product up. We're just helping as we need to, so. And that'll be the same with the ERP system. We'll help manage the project. We'll walk alongside and help everywhere we can, but it's going to be the employees that work in this city every day and know their jobs and functions that will be performing, that legwork. And so I want to be very clear on that,
Wow.
but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can go to the investment report.
Go ahead.
So back in June of last year, I know Patrick came and talked about the economy and where our portfolio sat. Between June and now, the world has changed a lot when it comes to interest rates. And of course, being a resident banker, understands exactly where we are at. But I think more important is the story that's being told out there and what you see in the paper and having somebody like Patrick that can kind of dive down a little bit more into the details to tell you the real picture of what's going on. I think that'll be important for this. So I'd like Patrick to come on up and go through it.
Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, good morning. Can we go back to that program that you're going to use? I'm actually a resident of Clay County, Missouri. I want to see what's going on.
What a coincidence.
Very much so. So do I hit a button? Okay, cool. Yeah, so like Ben said,
You'll
when I was
hit
here.
down, by the way, sir. You hit down to go to the next slide, not up.
Down?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So I wish I could fib and say that not anything's happened since June, but that's a major lie. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on. So again, to refresh anybody's memory that may not have been here the last time, my name's Patrick Smith. I work for BOK Financial in Kansas City, Missouri. My office is actually in Overland Park, Kansas, but our headquarters is in Tulsa. What's
Just
that?
speaking to the mic so everybody can hear.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
And normally I'm loud, but I want to try to go through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the majority of my time this morning, and I'm going to try to be fast. I don't know if you guys can remember, but I can be long-winded. So I'm going to try to get through this quickly. But Jolene knows this. But I'm going to spend the majority of my time this morning on the kind of an economic update, like what's happened, where we've been, where I think we're going to go. And then at the end, I'll look at a couple of metrics of the portfolio and kind of give you an idea of where we're at, and again, where I think we're going to be going from there too. So, so right out of the gate, I mean, this tells the story. I mean, if you look at, this is the yield curve, a year ago, the yield curve a month ago, and the yield curve today. And so, we've had 475 basis points of increases by the Federal Reserve trying to combat inflation. I mean, I know that it's going to be like you've heard this over and over and over and over, but it appears that the Fed's going to continue to raise rates, and I'm going to kind of show you some reasons why I think that's going to happen. So if you look at the yield curve today, you can see that it's still inverted. We have short-term rates that are actually bumping up to 5%. We have longer-term rates that are now actually going over 4%. Just kind of happened last night and this morning. Like the 10-year Treasury is now, I think as I pulled up in a parking lot, it might have been a 4.08. So today's like the first day that it's really gone over 4. So rates keep going up. So what the yield curve, I mean, is basically telling us is that we're headed towards a recession. I mean, it always happens. And you always hear the four most famous words, in my opinion, in Wall Street or on Wall Street are, this time is different. And they never are. I mean, they've ratcheted up rates so much. The difference between the 3-month Treasury bill and the 10-year Treasury note is the widest it's been in a long time. And so, again, these are all, reasons that it's, sooner or later that the economy is going to start slowing down. We're going to go into a recession. So skipping forward, this is just the different rate hikes we've had over the course of the year, and you can kind of see it's a forecast going forward that the phrase you've been hearing here most recently, in my opinion, from the Federal Reserve is that, they're going to keep rates higher for longer. I'm sure you've heard that quote. And, a year, I'll get to that in a second, but we thought there for a while that they would stop raising rates sometime first quarter, beginning of second quarter of 2023, and then maybe even start cutting rates by the end of this year, because this would throw us into a recession. But with the most recent inflation numbers that have been coming out, it appears that that's not the case. So we're going to kind of keep our eye on this. So here's just a graph that just shows the Fed funds futures and where we've been and kind of what we're looking forward, going into the future. You can see that, does this have like a pointer on it too? I mean, you can see where they originally the Fed, I think, was saying that we were going to start to peak out sometime towards the fall and then decrease. But I think we're probably going to end up, again, staying higher for longer. So we'll see what happens. This is the story that I want to tell. This is the story that I talk to, to people on a regular basis. So if you look at the top chart, this is the forecast in December of 21 of where rates were going to be in the future a year ago. I mean, how quickly things have changed. You come down here, this is kind of where we're at and where they think we're going. And so you can see that 2003, the market, the Federal Reserve, I had a couple dates I kind of wanted you to write down, like the next FOMC meeting is on March 22nd. So you want to, keep your ears open to see what they say when they have that meeting. Prior to that, you want to watch the jobs data on March 10th. That'll be next week. It's actually a little bit late because the way it's always supposed to be the first Friday of the month, but it's a short week this month, so it'll be next weekend. And then CPI numbers that'll be released on March 14th. I mean, that's going to be another, these are the numbers that the Fed is trying to pay attention to. And then lastly, the GDP number on March 30th. So those are kind of 4 dates that you should, write down and kind of pay attention to see what the results are. But like I said, originally, they were talking about Fed funds being 1.6 by the end of this year, and we're already at 475. So, I mean, again, just everything's been kind of blown out the window with and everybody in the world a year ago thought that we would go up, but not nearly as fast as we've gone up now. And that's all has to do with all the inflation, all the money that's been, pumped into the system through COVID and after COVID and whatnot. So the takeaway from this that I think about is that another word that you've probably heard a number of times in the last year or two is transitory. Apparently, inflation is not as transitory as we thought it was. And I'll get into some of the inflation numbers here in a few minutes. The Taylor rule, I'm not going to get into this, but this is something we've used on some other presentations. There's an economist by the last name of Taylor that came out with some formulas to how to predict where the Fed funds rate should be. And all I'm going to mention is that the Taylor rule takes into consideration the Fed funds rate, what inflation is, and GDP, and how they all kind of work together. And if you look at this, they're talking about much higher rates than what the market is talking about. But then these are taken into consideration like real-time numbers. So as the Fed starts to keep raising rates, your inflation and GDP and employment will all change. So eventually these two numbers are probably going to start working towards each other. So, but if you ever want to, I majored in economics. If you really want to get into some fun, econ, accounting and whatnot, and go look at the Taylor rule, and you can kind of study up on that. Here's your CPI numbers. Last month it was 6.4% for January. A couple comments. You're starting to see things come down, like just driving down here this morning. I got gas yesterday in Kansas City at a Costco, and it cost me $2.89. As I keep going south, it kept getting closer to 3 and over 3 and whatnot. But the point is that some of your energy inflation, I think, is dissipating. There are people out there that say that it's just a lull, that it's eventually going to start to go up again. I don't know. We'll just have to watch and see what happens. Food inflation. We've all heard about the price of eggs and everything else that's going on. It's not going away. I don't do the grocery shopping, but my wife complains about how much everything costs as she makes her trips to the grocery stores. Service inflation is still there. It hasn't subsided either. So, inflation is still very high, 6.4%. The Fed's mandate is 2%, so they've got a lot of work to do. So that's why you keep hearing that they're going to continue to raise rates and then keep them higher for longer. Bless you. Consumer expectations, there's a number of surveys that have been coming out that, the consumer isn't feeling as good as they were a year ago. And I'm going to kind of get into the weeds as to why that's the case. The Federal Reserve forecasts going forward, this is where, if you want to look at a couple comments to make here, this unemployment rate's still very low. And until you start to see this number increase, and again, I could talk about this for over an hour, but the labor force participation rate is still very low. I don't know what it's like here in Branson, but it's still very difficult to hire people. There's lots of job openings. And it's because people have just left the workforce and no one really knows where they went. I've heard stories that people will do laundry. They sit at home and they'll do people's laundry for $300 a week, but they're not being counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's lots of things going on in that arena. And we'll have to kind of pay attention. This is another number to pay attention to. This came out last week, this PCE number. Again, I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but it's another consumption issue, and you're starting to see it's not coming down as much as we thought it was. And so that's why, again, we think that Fed funds is going to continue to remain elevated. And then right here, if you go across the Fed funds rate for the forecast for 2023. So you can see that it continues to increase, right, from 22 to 23. And the market's telling us, or the Federal Reserve is telling us, that in 24 we should start to come down a little bit, and even more so in 25. And that would be evident of some type of an economic slowdown or a recession. But this 5.1 to 5.4, that's what the Fed has predicted that the Fed funds is going to peak. And I would argue, I think that it might go higher. And again, we'll just have to wait and see. So what we always look at is we try to figure out, where we're at, where we're going. And so what this is telling us that we're kind of in that late cycle. So what I try to tell people on a regular basis when I'm talking to them about like what's going on in the economy, I feel like the pendulum is starting to swing a little bit. I mean, we've had all of these rate increases, 475 basis points in the last year, but there's a lag, right? I mean, as the Fed continues to increase rates, it takes it a while for it to affect the overall economy. And there's a difference of opinion on how fast or how long it takes to affect. Like you're talking about transparency with everything here at the city of Branson so the public can see what's going on. The Federal Reserve, I mean, they have a meeting, and then the week later, they announce the minutes of the meeting. When I started in this business, it was 5 years after the meeting before they announced the meeting minutes. So we're seeing things a lot faster now than we used to in the past. But at the end of the day, it seems like we're getting to the point where, if you look at these different, cycles, I mean, we're at a spot where in October, the 5-year Treasury was 4.5. It's not there now. And the 10-year was like 3.90, and now, of course, it's gone over 4%. So, I mean, are we going to be setting like another, we're going to keep another high? I don't know. But we seem to be, what we're thinking is rates are definitely getting closer to that peak. And that's when you're managing portfolios, that's what you're trying to figure out. You're trying to hit that peak. So, and I'll show you with the city's portfolio kind of what's happened. And at some point, what we'll end up doing is we'll try to extend some of our maturities a little bit farther out on the yield curve to lock in those rates before the Fed starts to ease, if that makes sense. And as I go through the year, I mean, this is, in my opinion, an informal presentation. So if you have any questions, just please raise your hand and ask as I go through. Real GDP versus unemployment, this is kind of what I was talking about. Look at how many job openings are still available around the country. There's lots of people looking for people to come to work. I mean, it's hard to get people to do work in Kansas City. I mean, I can't get, I take a couple newspapers, I can't get people to deliver the newspapers on a regular basis, and you complain, and they're like, I'm sorry, I'm just not gonna be, I mean, they're not living up to their expectations, in my opinion. It's like, I want the paper at my house at 6:30 in the morning, but I don't get it until 8, and I complain to the guy that I'm gonna have to cancel, and his response is, sorry to hear that. Yeah. I mean, it didn't used to be that way. I mean, people did what, they're not, again, that's more of a philosophical situation, but so as there's all these different job openings, and like I said earlier, with unemployment rate being 3.7%, I mean, the Fed's not going to stop raising rates until we start to see a slowdown in employment. And again, that's that number that comes out on looks like the 10th next week. So watch that number. I mean, and it's crazy. And I think I may have shared this when I was here in June, and this is where I can kind of get long-winded, but years ago, let's see, 8 or 9 years ago, I was actually counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the employment survey. So every Friday of the month, first Friday of the month, they come out with all like how many jobs were created, what the unemployment number is, what the wage, the average hourly wage numbers. They talk about the labor force participation rate. I was called and contacted. Do you know how many households are surveyed around the United States to get this number? Somebody take a wild guess.
1,000?
That's pretty good. You're not close, but I mean, you're low. I would have thought like 5 million or something. I mean, we have 390 million people in the United States, 50,000 households. To me, it's a small sample size. And then the other part of it is it wasn't me, it's not my social security number, it was my address. It was just a random address. And there were months that nobody even contacted me. So now I'm 50, almost 54. I think one of the things about growing older is I'm just very skeptical of like where these numbers come from and how they get them. And some of these are numbers that have been created, many, many years ago, and they might need to be updated, like the basket of goods, for like the inflation numbers, CPI and whatnot. So again, until you start to see the unemployment rate rise and the number of jobs created decrease, these are, signs the Fed's going to continue to raise rates. Last month, they were expecting a headline number of 200,000, I believe. They got 517. Total shock. I mean, nobody knew that was going to happen. Rates went up. Now let's talk about more, So all the numbers we've had recently have been pretty hot, so to speak. GDP is the other part. GDP is positive. As we continue to see positive GDP numbers on a monthly basis, or they come out monthly, but they're all estimates for the quarters. I think we were 2.7 in the fourth quarter. Now they're predicting first quarter GDP. And this is a great website if you want to go look. The Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank puts out this GDP Now number, and it's updated like every couple of days. And it's a great place to just kind of go to their website and look and kind of see what's happening. But as these numbers continue to stay positive, again, just another variable that the Fed is going to look at and say, okay, we need to continue to raise rates and then to keep them higher for longer. So, again, keep an eye on these numbers. The 10-year minus the 3-month, I talked about that. Again, another late cycle type indication. We look at the difference between the 10-year and the 3-month. I mean, that shows you that the yield curve is still inverted. Again, another sign of inflation. And like I said, employment starts to bottom. I mean, just think about it. I mean, when the Fed's raising rates to cool down the economy, right? And so as they raise these rates, we need to start seeing these types of economic releases cool off, and they haven't yet, at least not a lot. And so that's why we're looking at these thinking we're in that late cycle. Like I said earlier, the pendulum appears to be beginning or wanting to swing. We're just not there yet. I mean, we're much closer than we were, in June when I was last here. And then my guess is by the time, if I get invited back in June again, I think we'll be even closer and maybe even already talking about rate cuts. We'll just have to wait and see. So this is kind of interesting, in my opinion, just some ancillary numbers. The labor force participation rate by age group. And you could see, I mean, look at the charts. And look what's happening. And I can kind of tell you a little bit of a story here on this. I mean, look at the age 16 through 19. It's low. And I have a little like anecdotal story to that. I have a 17-year-old. I have a 20-year-old that's a freshman at Mizzou, and a 17-year-old that works at home. And like I told him, as long as you play sports, you don't have to work, right? Well, now he's got to the point where he's not as interested in sports. He's starting to play golf and whatnot, but now he has a job. People play sports, teenagers play sports because it's fun. Going and getting a job, it's not a lot of fun, right? I mean, it's a social type thing. And so, when you play sports, you're usually pretty happy. When you go get a job, somebody's telling you what to do, what time to be here, what time you have to stay till, and all that kind of stuff. And my son works. He works at Hy-Vee. So, I mean, I want him to work, and I want him to try to earn his own money. And even my daughter at the University of Missouri, she works like 2 days a week at Shakespeare's Pizza. So if you're ever there during the day, go by and see her. So I think she just does it for her. I pay for everything else. I think we all know what she's using her spending money on. So, which is fine. I'm happy for her. But you're just seeing that the demographics are just changing, as you look at, it's harder to find employees, and we used to, hit that teenage group all the time, and now they're not always there. So, again, just more of an ancillary type observation. Real consumption continues to go, down. What you're seeing is that when you look at wages aren't keeping up with inflation. We all know that. We all see that. A lot of us experience that. I mean, and you're going to see kind of the story that I'm trying to tell here in a second. How are people keeping up with the increased costs? It's harder to get loans at banks. Banks are the first people to, like, I mean, you work at a bank. Banks are the first folks to say, look, I mean, the economy is starting to slow down. We're going to tighten our credit standards because we don't want to be caught with all these loans when people can't repay them. And I've heard stories. I work with a number of banks as well, and I'm hearing stories. I'm not a lender, so I don't have firsthand. This is all secondhand. But I'm hearing stories about banks that have lent people money to buy something. They have good collateral. They're not worried about losing any money on the loan. But then over the course of the last year, what they've seen is that borrower has gone out and borrowed more money from another bank, maybe to purchase a house, and then he's gone and borrowed more money from, say, like Toyota Motor Credit, or from somebody to buy a $75,000 truck without any of these other banks knowing. And this is just like one example, and it's a bank not far from here, and his comment was, this has got to be going on all across the country. So people are just they're borrowing more money because they have less income. And on this chart, you can kind of see the trend and what's happened with credit card debt. I mean, it continues to go up. And that's how people are making ends meet, in my opinion. So it tells the story of the tightening credit standards, people borrowing money, from multiple lenders. And so the consumer's feeling some stress. And we'll see how long that lasts. Savings rates. They are now back to a historical low. A couple comments here, as far as like what people are doing. Business travel. Like, I've been traveling quite a bit, even during COVID when I could, but business travel's not back to pre-pandemic standards. And it's because, we all have Zoom, which I'm not a big fan of. I'd rather do this, come see people in person. But the group that's picked up the slack in the travel industry is the consumer. I mean, the consumers are traveling like crazy. Like Kansas City, we just opened up a brand new airport. I don't know if you guys heard about that on Tuesday.
Missouri one, is that right? The Southwest?
Yep, that was the first flight out of
flight.
Kansas City, yeah. I'll get to go. I'm flying next Tuesday, so that's the first time I've been in the new airport, so I'm kind of excited. I've heard some stories that somebody like posted something on social media that they went to like the Boulevard Beer, is real popular in Kansas City, and they have a Boulevard Brewery apparently inside the new airport. But when they went in there to get a wheat, whatever, pale ale or whatever they make, they didn't have any Boulevard beer. So they're working the kinks out. It's going to get better, I think. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the airport looks like next week. And so my point is that the business travel, even at Bank of Oklahoma in 2020 during the pandemic, all of our accountants and whatnot, saw how little money we were spending on travel and entertainment, and that just added to the bottom line. And so, did they tell us, no, we can't travel on 21 or we can't travel on 22? But I mean, if it would have been up to them, we wouldn't have. I mean, because we saved so much money as a company by not taking people to dinner, not flying places, not driving to see people. But the consumer's been the one that's been picking that up, and they've been picking it up, I think, by the prior chart with charging things. And I'll talk about that more here real quick. So here's your personal savings rate. Consumption and whatnot. And really what I wanted to point out here is not so much like what people are doing here, but this part right here, the share of U.S. adults whose monthly expenses are more than their income. And so in this less than 50,000 group, you can imagine they have probably the most stress on them. Well, they're spending 7.2% more than what they're earning. You go to the next income group and you see theirs is up as well. And even folks that make over $100,000, they too, or at least a portion of them, are spending more than they earn, and it's because things have gotten so much more expensive. Consumer loan delinquencies. You're seeing it pick up in cars and credit cards, autos and credit cards. Not so much, as far as, other consumer or at the bottom, but, these are always the first ones. People quit paying their car payment before they stop paying their AT&T, phone bill. And so we have to watch that. I work with a lot of financial institutions that over the last couple of years made a lot of indirect car loan paper, and they're starting to see some stress in those loan portfolios. People aren't able to make those payments. And that's again, another sign, in my opinion, that pendulum is beginning to kind of sway the other direction. Consumer confidence, again, you can see that it's still very low, and for all the reasons that I've already addressed. Now we get into one last comment too. Well, I'll get to that in a second. The current rate environment, you just kind of see just an illustration of how much things have changed. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it has your different rates and historical yields from the middle of February, and it goes back a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So I think we're normalizing, in my opinion, in rates. I don't think we're ever going to see the 0% rates again. I think we're going to kind of, my first mortgage when I got a house was 7.75, and I'm sure there's some folks in here that had even higher mortgage rates when they bought their first houses. And so it's going to be a new norm. I'm not going to get into real estate a whole lot, but home values are still very elevated in the Kansas City metropolitan area because there's a shortage of inventory. I mean, everybody has 2 and 3 handle mortgages. I mean, who wants to sell that house, pay off that mortgage, and then go into a 7% mortgage? I mean, your payment, it's totally changed. So that's what's keeping values elevated, in my opinion. This is a chart that I used I talked about this the last time I was here. We use this on a weekly basis. It's dated just a little bit because I've had a couple of presentations, but what we look at, everything, I think I talked about this, everything's based off of treasuries. Treasury is your gold standard, backed by full faith and credit of the U.S. government. So when we look at this stuff, we try to find spreads over treasuries and what asset classes have that spread that you can look at to purchase today. And you can see what's happening right now. It's these callable agencies. And so, like when I mentioned earlier, that at some point in time, you want to start to lengthen your maturities to lock in these rates before the Fed starts to cut them. These look really attractive at the moment because of these spreads. The problem is these are all this is a 3-year final with a 1-year call. So what normally happens is if you start to load the boat with these callable agencies, they look really good for the first year until that call option comes up. And if the Fed has already started to lower rates, you get that bond taken away from you, and then you're forced to reinvest at a lower rate. So the beauty of what happens with a Missouri municipality is that you have stringent standards as far as your investment policy goes. So we can't be going out and buying 20-year, 1-year. I mean, we'd love to, but you can't buy past a 5-year final maturities by state statutes. And so we focus from here up. But what I like to do is looking at, and we've been doing a number of these CMBSs that I talked about last time I was here, and they're backed by Fannie, Freddie, and whatnot, and they're more bullet type securities. So you're not getting the optionality or you're not having to deal with a bond getting put back to you before you want it put back to you. So, but if anybody ever want to talk, it just goes all the way across. You got the different asset classes, treasuries, bullets, and you can see the agency bullets. That's going to be a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loan Bank, but it doesn't have a call option tied to it. So it's just going to have a set final maturity, just like a treasury. But you can see that these yields are, there's just not a lot of spread. And so, as these treasuries get even higher, this might be the next component that gets added to the portfolio down here, just because it's the gold standard. And if you ever did need to sell something, which you haven't yet, those get the best bids. I mean, because there isn't any type of an option attached to it. So, any questions about that slide? How am I doing on time? Good, right? How much? 5? Perfect. All right, so your portfolio, I mean, I've got numerous pages on this, and I could spend a lot of time on it, but what I want to make a couple of observations. If you look at your tax equivalent book yield, it's 215. In June, it was 123. So that's how we kind of measure our, progress. We've gone up almost 100 basis points in a little over 6 months. This data is as of the end of January, so we're just a little bit more than 6 months. But what I want to show you, what I've been able to do, in June, your duration of your portfolio was 2.82 years. And what I've been able to do is I've been able to shorten it. So if you think about investing, we've been backfilling a little bit because the yield curve is the steepest between 3 and 5, like around 3 to 4 years. That's where you're getting some of the best yields. However, that's starting to change a little bit as the Fed continues to ratchet up Fed funds and the short-term rates. The 1-year Treasury bills like bump it up against 5. But again, my point is, all of a sudden you buy the 1-year Treasury bill and you get 485, 490, 495, whatever. A year from now it matures. Now you're forced to reinvest at a lower rate if the Fed's starting to drop rates. So you have to be careful not to get caught in that trap. In the 80s, everybody did that with the inverted yield curve when we had extreme inflation. A 2-year Treasury yielded more than a 30-year Treasury. But you're talking about, a 2-year Treasury back then at, 16% and a 30-year Treasury at 15%. And I guarantee you that people that bought the 30 at 15 were pretty darn happy because, rates obviously went back to the norm. So we've been able to shorten the average life and the duration. The average life went from 295 to 276. And of course, the elephant in the room is our loss on the portfolio, and it's an unrecognized loss because we haven't sold anything, but that's attributed to the fact that rates have come up 475 basis points. And if we had lots of bonds in the investment portfolio that had callable options attached to those, that loss would be even higher because those get much worse bids if you go, the market value is much lower because of that option. It's just one more variable in that particular security that lowers the price that you could sell.
So Patrick, at a high level, quick summary, your firm is managing, give or take, $70 million of City of Branson's money. That's
Correct.
a lot. And right now, we're earning 2.15% on our money. That's pretty healthy.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, that when I look at these presentations, and I always try to think of what questions people are going to ask me when I go over things, and so when I look at the 215, it's way better than it used to be, right? But I wish it was a lot higher. The problem is, like, I don't know, in your personal, investment portfolio, your Fidelity account or whatever, you've got cash in there. Well, that cash resets like every day. Well, the portfolio here, we can't do that. The only way we'd be able to do that is if we just liquidated everything and then reinvested everything. And that's not feasible.
Yep.
So the point that I'm trying to make is going forward, every single thing that we purchase is going to be much better than what's rolling off. So this 215, if I come back in June, I fully expect to have that 215 over 3.5. I mean, we'll see where we're at.
This is being recorded.
I know, and that's where I'm going to.
Yeah, the point I was going to make is, I know Ben has mentioned a few times, and we're going to hear it more, but we're sitting on $70 million in cash, earning 2.15%, and that's not anything about your world, but Ben's been mentioning, for example, our police department in that. about borrowing from ourselves instead of going to the market and borrowing money. Is that correct, Ben? Yeah. And so I was just trying to illustrate the rationale.
Nope, and that would make sense. So like if you, and that's where we'd have communication with the city, so as there's a maturity or whatever, maybe you don't reinvest the maturity in a new bond, you use it to fund another operation.
Versus going and paying interest to someone else, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, because you've got this money, and that's what that money is here for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for other purposes. I mean, you don't have to keep it all invested.
Yeah, I just wanted to illustrate that to help clarify, Ben, when you start those conversations.
Yeah, and that's what we have to communicate as what we do as things roll off. So no, totally makes sense. Because it's just like, why would you, if you're only getting paid $215 in your bank account, why would you go out and pay 7% to buy a car, right? I mean, you'd use your money in your bank account to purchase that vehicle. I mean, it's just Econ 101. But that's kind of new, but yeah, I'll be more than happy to talk to you guys about that as we go forward. We've got a breakdown, below of the portfolio. I mean, you can see we've gone a little bit. I have added some of the agencies because they are higher yields. You have more of a total return portfolio, and that takes in consideration the different call options. So I try not to do too many of the call options because I don't want those higher coupons to get called away at the wrong time. So that's really kind of there's a lot of meat and potatoes in here. You can go through and you can look at your, by asset class, the market values, the whole 9 yards. You can look at your distribution as far as coupons, credit quality. I mean, this is just all kind of information for you as you go forward. And if you have any other questions, I'll be more than happy to ask, to answer those. But
I have a question. Mayor, may I?
Yes.
On the agency investments that you're talking about, are those the Fannie, Freddie mortgage-backed securities things, or are they different vehicles?
no, so what we have on the agencies, these are just going to be just like the callable, the Federal Home Loan Bank or Freddie Mac callable agencies.
Okay.
And so there'd be like maybe a 4-year final with a 1-year call option. They just have a straight coupon payment that pays semi-annually, and that's it.
Okay.
But like I said earlier, and those have good yields, but there's a chance they get called away. And so there are some portfolios in the state that they use a different accounting method where they call it a cash portfolio. And so the yield will be overstated, if that makes sense. There's other securities in here that I've never, put in the portfolio because it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, it's a step-up bond. There may be a 5-year final step-up that starts at, 4.5. 6 months later, it goes to 5. It may go all the way up to 10 over the life of the bond. And then the yield to maturity on that bond is going to be overinflated because we all know that bond's not going to step to a 10%. But it's like window dressing. Some people put those in their portfolio and they look good. But again, a callable agency is a double-edged sword. I mean, it always gets called away from you when you least want it. And so what we've done are these CMBSs that are backed by the full faith and credit of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. We don't do any Ginnie Mae, but because they have longer final maturities. But what they do is they're bullets. They may, when I say a bullet, I mean it has a set final maturity. And then it might have a little teeny weeny pay down, but not a lot. And so they look like a bullet agency, but they give you closer to a callable agency yield. But we know we have like a set final like 4 years from now. And you can see, like one of the things to point out when you look at your cash flows, what I was just telling you about 3 years kind of being like the peak, as far as where yields are. If you look at your cash flows, I mean, it's just natural that we've got more coming due in 3 years than we do the other 4 years, other 2 years.
So Patrick, the majority of our funds are in the CMBS. Are those callable in the 1-year timeframes that you're
Nope.
talking about?
They're not.
Okay.
So what happens is, maybe if I come back in June or sometime in between, I could give you kind of an overview on just CMBS. They're commercial mortgage-backed securities. And the beauty of them right now, so you're talking about like they may be a one-loan apartment complex. But the way they work, and with rates where they are, these are all offered at a discount. So Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, they guarantee these bonds at par. So in the event that it was, there was a default on it, I mean, we get paid back at par. I mean, some of those, that'd be a pretty good deal. Especially if you're buying bonds at like $93, $94 price, you get paid back at 100. I mean, that's an awesome situation. But that doesn't happen very often. And so, right now is just a good time. They're harder to find. I mean, everything's just hard to find. I mean, there's still a tremendous amount of liquidity in the system out there, and the Fed's trying to suck that all out. But like when I go out to look for 6 month or 1 year type paper, I have a hard time finding it because nobody wants to sell it. They're not liquidating it. They don't want to take the loss. So it's more and more difficult to find. So the CMBS is, like I said, they give you a better yield. You've got the safety behind the agency that guarantees it. And then, we can lock in that rate for a longer period of time. So, I mean, at some point, what we'd want to do is start to, move out to that 4 and 5 year when we think things are going to start to slow down. We're just not there yet. I mean, we're approaching it. And then there's a ton of variables. I didn't get into the situation in the Ukraine. I mean, there's a million. We've got another big election coming up here in a couple of years. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can't predict, what's going to happen. And so, but just based on the pure economic environment that we're in, we're going to have a recession. I mean, you hear them talk about a soft landing, a hard landing, and all that. This is an art, not a science, at the Federal Reserve Board's office when they raise and lower these rates. And so I go back to my earlier comment about the lag. We never know how long that lag is going to be. It typically takes 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year for all these rate increases to work their way through the system. So we've been doing this for a year now. They'll probably raise rates at least until through June, in my opinion, and then we'll see what happens. So that's why I was saying, write down these dates. I mean, they're great. I mean, you see them on the news, but, March 10th for the employment data, March 14th for CPI. I mean, if that thing's hot again, expect more rate increases. I mean, if you start to see it go from 6.4 down to 5.4, that's a good trend. I mean, but I don't think that March is going to be, March's numbers based off of what's going on in February, and I haven't seen that we've had a tremendous amount of slowdown in inflation as of yet. So I would expect these numbers to be, elevated for a little time to come, so.
Appreciate that. I know, are you wrapped up?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I could go on for hours,
Yeah, I know.
but no, it's, I
think-
don't want to overwhelm you with all the, the minutia.
I just think before you go, Cody probably has a question about that Taylor rule.
Yeah, no, that's afterwards.
From my personal opinion, I feel very comfortable with you and your firm managing our city funds.
Well, I appreciate that comment, and I enjoy working with Jolene and everybody here at the city, and like I said, I've always kind of had a soft spot. I spent a lot of time in Branson. I stayed at the strip mall dorms coaching a baseball tournament, a couple times. I mean, I come to Branson quite a bit. I enjoy it. I'm actually leaving here to meet some clients at Big Cedar Lot for lunch. So I'm trying to spend some money while I'm here. But thanks again, and please invite me back, whenever you need me.
Yeah. So Ben, you'll take about 5 minutes to tell us what Patrick just said.
You have my contact information. Jolene, call me or email me, or if anybody ever has any questions, please reach out.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yep, thank you guys.
You're on.
Disbursements is the next one.
Yep. In the mic.
Want to pull
Ben.
those up?
We'll get those up in just a moment.
Yeah, okay, thank you. What while they're doing that, one of the things that I did want to point out is when he shows the yield curve, the early years, 1, 2, 3, and 4, where we typically borrow in that frame is around 5%. So that's the money you're giving up, you're not paying to actually borrow from yourself.
Yeah,
And
that's
we
common,
just
common
authorize
sense. You
that.
don't borrow at 5 when your
Exactly.
cash is earning
And
2.
you can do it, and that's one of the reasons to do that. As far as the disbursements are concerned, there's the second line down here, the fire truck loan payment, that pays off in 2024, so that payment is still going out until that. And this is one that was financed, I believe, over a 4-year period. I know last Tuesday, we just authorized a 10-year term on the new fire truck. Obviously, we authorized this 10-year, we're going to forecast it at 4, just like we do this one. And that's when we're borrowing from ourselves again.
Great, that's great.
So we're doing the same thing.
So Ben, for transparency, and we'll use the fire truck as an example.
Yeah.
We know what our borrow rate is today, we know
Right.
what our earnings rate is. When we borrow from ourselves, public safety, so is the city general fund going to loan the public safety fund the money for that fire truck? And then how much, what do you do with interest rates?
Yeah, so the way that works, right now, we take the fund with the most investments. And the one, and you'll see it here in a little bit, the one with the most cash right now is the tourism fund. So that tourism fund is going to actually give the fire department the money to buy that truck. And then that payment comes back, the county staff will make that payment every year plus 2% interest. So the tourism fund will then earn 2% interest on that loan.
So the public safety fund to buy a fire truck is going to be paying 2% interest
Right.
back to
Back to the tourism fund.
To the
Now,
tourism.
when we go back out for software or police cars or the campground is the next one.
Yeah.
We got $1 million sitting there. That's one we can take out of the general fund. So the general fund's earning that money.
Yeah.
And the the parks fund is going to be paying it.
I just didn't know if you were putting in a margin
Yeah.
of loaning the money at 3%.
Yeah,
But,
right.
but we're just doing it at par.
Yeah, right.
That's fair. That's fair.
right.
Thank you.
And the rest of these are fairly nominal amount. You can see those bad BTMA people down there. This Keta bill, there's really not a whole lot other surprising issues within the disbursements.
Kutak Rock, 70,000. What period of time? That's for 1 month?
That I don't know. We can look that up.
Cody, you're saying the month before was 80?
Month before was 80,000, and then this one was 70,000.
So Kathy, I'm not sure, but we may want to hire.
Yeah, we can follow that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So this is on my front two burners, Mr. Mayor, is to find ways to address the legal cost to the city.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of extenuating things going on, as well as our normal legal services, too. But I will be pleased to bring back something that I'm working on probably within the next Finance Committee meeting for sure, for you guys to look over. But I'm really looking to plug the hole in the boat here.
Thank you.
No offense, Joe.
Can you pull up the PowerPoint that I put together? All I did in this case is, this is the dashboard, and we usually show the dashboard, but this case, I just put some of the charts that I go over in a PowerPoint so I can just go through it on my own instead of having staff do it. So this is the end of the year. We're going to show you guys what happened at the end of '22. And I know I've been preaching '22 is looking a lot better than what we had ever saw in history for that matter. So this is the 1% sales tax. December '22 over December '21 was 16.6% increase. Typically, we see those around 1% and 2%. We're 26% above our budget that we set for '22, all of '22. And if you look, Tourism tax is even a bigger winner. Well, let me go back one. January 23, that's also in your packet, just not in the dashboard, is 16.5% over January of 22. So that's a fairly sizable increase just for January. And remember, that was 2 months ago, point of sale.
So that was for November sales.
Yep, right. So we haven't seen all of Christmas come through. February and then March would probably dip back down. Tourism tax, month over month, we're 26% over 2021, 34% above budget, and 5% above all of '21, which is a more normal number. And remember, throughout the last few months, we've been talking about that increase being lower and lower. We're steady out at 5%. January is actually 0.2% under January of '21. And I say that we don't have a trend yet. That could be cash flow issues. So I really didn't put it in the dashboard at all. Just kind of be aware. That's one we're seeing kind of slide back down in a normal range. But it's still a normal that's much higher than we'd ever seen before. So that's not a bad story. As far as sectors are concerned, amusements are 5% over 2021. Theaters came in over 46%, and these are all based on sales tax collections. Theaters came in 46% over 2021. Hotels are 33% over 21, and then campgrounds 21% or 31% over. So they're all double-digit increases. Nightly rentals are up 46%, and then restaurants are up 30%. And when we talk to some of the business owners, hotel, the convention center, the Hilton where I stay, you talk to some of these individuals, and you know that their prices have gone up. So some of that increase is based on price. So in '23, we'll see some of that settle back out, but it at a higher rate. I seriously doubt anybody's going to drop their prices based on the economy and where it's at right now. So those increases, there's still a really healthy condition to be in. As far as the vehicle counts versus each one of the tourism and sales tax, you can kind of see where the year panned out. This is one that was new based on the mayor's suggestion. And you can see that the trends really follow. So there's leading indicators. They're not directly correlative, but they do have leading indicators on where the tourism tax and sales tax are. The line represents the tax, and then the bars are the vehicle counts. And then they're actually on the same month. So the point of sale for December on the line is actually what's in there. So the people that came in, that's the spending that they had. So I thought that was an interesting, and we're adopting this with other entities as well. But you won't get a royalty fee off of it, I'm sorry. The overall sales tax graphs just shows you the margin, what we're talking about here. The top line, the black line is 22, the next line down being 21. That's still a significant increase. When you look at December, just the month of December, and that cumulative, when you look at 2019, the bottom line, or actually 2019 is, the bottom line is 2020. Then 2019 is the next one up. You can see from 2019 and then 21 and 22, there are fairly sizable jumps in each one of those. So it'll be exciting to see where we land in 23. And just in a picture for tourism tax, that narrow gap between red and purple is where we're living right now, and it's steady, right? That gap isn't going up or down. It's just fairly steady month to month. Cash balance, operating funds, and we'll kind of I'll go through these in a little bit later, but general fund is sitting on an increase, obviously, with out on the far right, water and sewer fund. A lot of that's going to be capital in the water sewer fund. Some of the big winners in this case is going to be tourism on the right-hand side. I mentioned that they're the ones sitting on a bunch of money, 25 million. And you know the number of projects we've got going through that fund is incredible. So you're going to see a cash balance carry over like that until projects really get funded out. On the left-hand side, you can see the first set of bars. It didn't show up. Public safety. This is the public safety. The police department's cash balance right there. The green line includes the purchase of the White House. Okay, and so that's last year's compared to this year. They're still sitting in a fairly healthy balance. The second set of lines is fire. If you add that fire to the very last column, that's their internal service fund. So this money's been shifted over to the fire department, fire station. So there's $3 million sitting there on that one. So those ended up being fairly healthy cash balances. Revenues over under expenses. Here's where we're thinking we're going to end the year, barring any kind of audit adjustments. I'd say 90% of this is going to be, 90% confident that this is going to be final. General fund came in with a surplus of $4.1 million. We expected to have something because we've been watching sales tax, obviously, and we have a conservative spending habit, especially in '22. Even with a lot of the budget amendments that have come through and spending that, we're still at 4.1 ahead. The tourism tax, that's 10.6 is just, again, carryover money. Some of that's carryover money that would go to the 25% CVB rate. So that'll get paid out. You'll see in March a budget amendment coming back so we can get that 85% allocated out to the chamber and get that rolled out. Here's what I kind of want to talk to you guys a little bit about. What do we do with the ending, that 4.1 that we have as a surplus coming in? And I really want to pay attention to that first set of bars, and that's the general fund. It says 101 general fund. The gray bar, the gray column, is our policy. It's around $6 million. I think that's way too low, but that's our policy. The bar right behind that, the green bar, is where we're going to end up. We estimate we're going to end up just over $14 million in a fund balance. The orangish red bar is last year's, right? So my suggestion here is my recommendation to you guys would be to take $3.7 million off in '22, take off of this and move it over to our savings account, internal service fund, to be allocated through the CIP process in this coming year. I know we've got certain things like the ERP that I would lease finance that we could pay cash for. We've got issues like the fire station that's coming up, that's got the big fat unknown. This makes it a little easier to fund something like that. These one-time issues that pop up, we can set this aside and then bring it back to you as those things come up.
I would be very much in favor of using that to apply to the increased cost of our fire department.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Is there any way we could take the surplus?
You can, Mike, please.
Is there any way we could take the surplus and pay off some of our bond or debt faster so that way we free up more
You're
income?
jumping ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
But that's a great question. I will get to that. That's a great question. Yeah, the answer, for short answer is yes, but I will get to that. But this actually allows us to set it aside. So what you'd see from me is a budget amendment for '22 that would allow us to move that money over, and we'd go ahead and move it over to internal service. That would increase that internal service. And then any of those kind of budget amendments, we'd come right back through Kathy in order to get it to you guys, so we have somebody looking at it. So we'll move forward with that. Now, what that does to us, if you look at the fund balance as a percentage of the general fund total expenses, this includes one-time transfers. Remember, we had a one-time transfer over to public safety just for a catch-up. If you remove the one-time, we end up around 75% fund balance. Our policy is total expenses, so that drops it back down to 50% fund balance. And that's with the shift over. That would be our estimate, so that's what we'll do. This just shows you where we were.
Ben, if you could go back to that previous slide, please. That 27 million in tourism, I know on the books, we have, I think we're estimating 10 million to spend on Hiawatha Heights for water and sewer. Is that where this money, that cost will come from?
Yeah, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
Along with a whole bunch of other projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. Revenues over expenses, the total picture just for general fund, 26 million. If somebody asks you what the operations are, here we go. Revenue coming in 26, the expenses going out is 21.8. 21.8 is more than just operations, there's around 9 million expenses for just regular routine operations. The general fund funds a whole bunch of transfers out, which is a bulk of this number. That's the overview of the how 22 ended. I'm not going to give you 23 on purpose, because it's just 1 month, and 1 month does not make a trend. I'll give you 20, I'll give you just February when it comes back, but even that, I don't think is going to be a big picture. When March comes in, we'll have a good trend set out. So you'll see that information come back in March. So the dashboard is also in your packet. We're not going to pull that up. I just wanted to make sure I pulled those out right there.
Any members of the committee have any questions? Daniel?
Outside the one I already asked. Outside the one I already asked, so.
I'm going to answer that one in this next presentation.
Oh,
I didn't pay him to actually ask that question, because it's a good one. The credit rating is the one I need next.
Ben, how much more do we have? We take a restroom break, or?
Yeah, if you want to, that's fine.
Let's go ahead and do that. Let's recess for a few minutes. bring this meeting back to order. For the record, Cody had to step out.
Is that because we went too long, Mayor?
Yes.
That'll be in my review later from Kathy.
At least the meeting started on time.
It did. There will
I
be a
was here
text
9
to it.
minutes early. I just want you to know. I was the first person here, so.
And Cody's not back yet. So I've only really got 3 slides to show you on this one. There's more in the packet, but there's only 3 slides. One of the questions that we were asked is because we know the world now looks a lot different than it did in 2019. And whenever you look at the city's financial health, there's 2 ways to look at it. There's the banker way, which is the investment way, right? The people that invest in your city. How do they see it? Then there's a public way. How do they look at things? And usually that's a very different point of view. This is the world we live in, and what our firm does, well, our group does for a living besides what I do here, is look at credit ratings and the health of the cities. They break, when you look at Standard & Poor's, who does your credit rating, they break it down into these categories. The biggest 3 categories are financial measures, the local economy, and management. No pressure, Kathy, 20% of that is yours. So those are the 3. Now, there's several descriptions in the packet as to what those are. Institutional framework is really stuff that you can't control. It's based on the state of Missouri and the county we sit in. Economy, I'll touch on this here in a minute. Management, same way. Financial management. Debt and contingent liabilities, just the total level of debt is 10%. It's not a huge number, what they're counting on. And this all breaks down into what your credit rating is. Back in 2019, your credit rating was an A-. And it went from a negative to a stable that year. When COVID hit, it went back down to a negative outlook. Still an A-, right? It just went down to a negative outlook. We ran your 22 financials unchanged through our sifter back in Chicago, and they came out with an A+. And I caveat that is we are not the rating agencies. This is what we would push for should they call and want an annual update. And I can show you why. But that A+ is going to be a baseline. That's where we would start the argument, and for multiple reasons. Institutional frameworks based on Missouri score, you really can't do anything about that. Economy, local economy, a lot of this you can't affect either. It's just a fact of life, right? Branson is tourism-centric. Just like 2020 or 2008, you realize when you unplug tourism, spending stops. So you're subject to that, right? Any negative can have a mitigating circumstance. And in this case, the mitigating circumstance is the level of debt you have, your financial policies, and the cash level you keep on hand. So the last presentation or the last conversation we just had was on the fund balance in the general fund, suggesting $4 million come off and we're staying at 50% fund balance. That's a lot. It seems high, right? It seems that's 20% higher than what that 30% policy is. My argument is we need that. Because if 2020 happens again and we're not seeing it coming, we got some balance. We have the same thing over in tourism. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
When 2020 hit and we literally shut down.
Yep.
Our bond rating went back down again, correct?
Right.
And, but because of the fiscal policies and the management and everything, they actually reached out, I believe.
Absolutely.
And moved us back up.
That's right.
Correct.
That's
Okay.
exactly right. Now,
And are we at that same rating now, or
You're-
have we gone down?
So you've got 2 different ratings. One's on the debt that goes through the state of Missouri.
Okay.
And that's at an A. And the other debt is the TIF-related debt, and that's an A-.
Okay.
And when it was, I think, late in 2020, they had a conversation with the city, how are you, they had conversation with all kinds of cities, but they had a conversation with the city, how are you mitigating these circumstances? And you had policies in place, and that took you out of the negative into a stable outlook. So whenever S&P looks at your rating, there's usually a letter grade, right? And then and then there's a plus or minus. just like there is any kind of college letter grade. But then on top of that, they'll look at, is it negative, which means if there's no changes made, you're bound for a decrease in rating. If there's a stable, it just means nothing's changing, you're good to go. If it's a positive, then there's a strong possibility of an upgrade, right? So you're right now stable. And that's a good caveat. But your concentrated local economy, and the income levels are a little lower than what they see on a national average. As far as strong management is concerned, the only thing here, obviously good financial management practices. The good could have changed to strong by having a debt management policy. And at the time, there wasn't one. I'm not sure if there's one since then, but if there isn't, you'll be seeing it come back through this summer. But that'll change. So they also look at turnover and staff and governing body, right? What kind of decisions are they making? And this is a conversation we'll have with Kathy, myself, and a couple of finance staff, and then our financial advisor. They'll have that conversation with us about, okay, what did you put in place? Even though you've had turnover this last year, how did that occur? Not how did it occur. What did you do after that to keep things moving? And that's a story that we tell. And then from there, it's pretty subjective as to what their opinion is, and they'll be very open and honest. And I don't expect to see that as a negative consequence, only because you have policies in place. You got more transparent. Your habit of conservative expenses and conservative revenue forecasting didn't change. It's all stable. You've got a great executive staff, right? All the directors are well tenured. And when it comes to finance, it's going to sound self-serving, but you plugged us in immediately to keep going, right? That means others would not have done that. They just floundered until they got to the end. But you saw something you could grab a hold of and move forward. And then bringing Kathy on with her experience is going to be a big plus as well.
So, Ben, there was an article in the Tri Lakes News that suggested that from a overall, how is the city operating, that there was a grave concern of our rating being at a high risk, moderate risk, based on our turnover here. Would you address that?
Yeah, that falls within the management category. You know, even though that's 20% of the rating, it's not the whole rating. The biggest overwhelming portion of that rating is financial measures. That's really what's going to trip most entities up. And then from that, it's really cash. And cash is usually king. The more cash you have, the higher rating it's going to be. Put everything else aside, that's what they're going to look at. What's your cash balances? That's the first thing on the questionnaire ever to go out. Second thing, economy, what revenue's coming in, and then what are you doing with it? So we've got a fund balance that could conceivably be 75%, right? Then they're going to ask, what are you doing with the fund balance? We're going to use one time, move it over here. We're going to look at our debt and start paying it down. And they're going to, oh crap, that's good stuff. They start writing it down. They haven't even got to the management piece yet. And they're already solidifying what the rating is. So they haven't got to the management piece. 30% of its financial policies, 30% of its economy. There's 60%. That's an overwhelming majority of what that rating is going to look at, those two pieces. Everything else is just filler.
Okay, good, yep.
I was going to, in that same article, I guess they kind of tied it to suggesting that we actually missed an audit or something like that, and I understand that we weren't up. We had already done the proper one, and there wasn't one due. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, we missed a what?
It was like something about it, that we missed an audit or something like that.
There hadn't been an audit for 2 years, I believe,
No,
2 years audit, I think is what it said.
are they referring to an external audit?
Yeah.
Or are they talking about a rating review? Because we've been audited every year. That's not without fail. That's required by bond issues, by bond covenants. You've got to be audited. And the last one was done in September. It was issued in September. It was done probably in May and June, but we did one every year. As part of that application process, not once. Okay. And the one time it would come up was the stuff we applied for in the 76 CID. Just because it's tourism related, it didn't come up then either. They were more interested in what we're doing with the money and how fast they could get it spent. Your history with grants and have you done it before? Most entities haven't done it before. But you've got a history of putting projects in place and a good, strong process for doing that. So, yeah, the rating usually doesn't come into play on those kind of conversations. I'm really surprised if it did. I've never seen it in 30 years. So I'll go over this financial measures. This looks like a lot of numbers. I want you to pay attention to the colors, right? And I'm going to focus you on the green. The green piece is that financial measures, right? Financial measures, that top green line, general fund as a percentage of expenses. This is expenses overall. So what this is measuring is your expenses as a percentage of your revenue that you bring in. The revenue you bring in, you've got unspent of that revenue 16%. That's usually around 2 or 3%. That's that $4 million we've got coming back into the net. So that's a positive number, very positive number. You can see a history there too, obviously. In 2021, that was a really high number, only because there wasn't a lot of spending. And the economy turned around. We started getting more sales tax. We got more tourism tax. The revenue went way up. So the percentage of our expenses as a portion of that revenue got big. I'm sorry, the net surplus got big. The next one down is the general fund as a result of expenses. This is the one where it's taken, this one's taken into account all governmental funds in total. So this is not just the general fund, it's everything else except for enterprise funds. So this is total. The same measure as above, it's just with total governmental funds. The rating agencies think, well, you've got access to this cash. We need to count it toward what you've got access to, at 35%, 34%. So that right there is an example of policies in place for a good outcome. 2019, we started on the top line 3.5%. We ended at 16.1. Higher is better. Same way with the next one down, higher is better. And at 34%, I can tell you, it's pretty darn high. So that's budgetary performance. What you budget, how did you end it? Budgetary flexibility, can you flex your decisions within that year? That's what this next one does. So your available reserves as a percentage of operating expenses, here it's 53%. I mentioned is around 50% if you, of total expenses. That number, if you leave one time in there, it's around, if you take one time out, it's around 75%. That's your fund balance level. Total available reserves, 16 million. This is, again, all general governmental funds. 14 million of that is general fund. Then liquidity really comes down to cash, your cash available. And you see we went in 2019, 54% available to 88% available. A huge increase. And then same thing with all governmental funds. 135% to 283%. It nearly doubled. And then the management, we painted that one green just because it's just not changed. Nothing's changed out of that management piece, the way they look at it. The economic indicators up at the top, the kind of yellowish, these are the ones that are economy-based, that a lot of, you really can't have a direct impact on. Your per capita earnings before interest is 3%, 73% of the U.S. total. So it's below the U.S. average, which is a little unfair in my mind because the overwhelming majority of people spending money here are not residents, they're tourists. And tourists with cash, that doesn't capture that in here. So that's a little unfair. Not that I have say in how they measure that. Market value per capita is also a little bit below when you compare it to the U.S. total. But the overwhelming majority of the financial measures are positive. And this is one of the bigger reasons we regraded it at A+. When we move forward with it.
So when you say we regraded at A+, that's your internal?
Our internal rating,
Not.
right,
Okay,
our internal rating. So we do that so we can come out with a solid conversation with the analysts as we talk to them on a regular basis about a lot of entities. We know how they think, we know what measures they're going to be looking at. So we'll just feed them the data just like this. Here's the measures, here's where it's at. You do the work for them, You spend less time on the phone. So this is really the answer I've got for you is 2019, how did it compare to 22? Fund balance went up. Cash balance went up. We kept our policies in place to weather the storm. If it happens again, we get good cash balances and good policies, should we need that again. That'll play a part in any kind of changes coming up that we don't see coming. The economy falls apart again, we've got a solid foundation to move forward. So it's a positive move. If we were to look at anything into the future, these are really the three categories we'd be looking at. We're already doing the first two. Finances and management is just already part of our process. This also gets back to your question this last half hour, debt and contingent liabilities. While debt assessment will likely remain weak, and that's because of the debt level you've got. Proactive planning, this is where your question comes in, and budgeting in order to manage the carrying cost. What we're going to do, and I've already got instructions back to our staff, is to take a look at your outstanding debt and the cash balances that exist, weigh that against capital, and see how much we can start buying that debt down. There are priorities within that debt that extends out, let's say past 2029, that are paying 10% coupons. They're 10% interest rates, in other words. Wow. Exactly. That's where we need to start buying that debt down. Wow. Not refinancing it, just paying it off. You've already done that. It started 2 years ago. You started paying down debt. I think it was COP that got paid off, just like that, doing the same thing. So we're just going to keep that process going. There's around 29 million that's going to come off between now and 2029, as in it'll pay off. And one of the things they also look at is what's your plans for debt in the future. And the only big one that I see coming up, obviously, is the CID, 76
CID, yeah.
It is a big one. We're toying with that one on the police station. It just all depends on how much that comes back with. And that borrowing 10 million from ourselves makes me a little nervous, but it doesn't mean that we need to borrow all of it externally. We can borrow some of it. And how do we plug that in? Because we've also got the campground coming up. In any other entity, we debt finance all of that, and it'd go 20 years. Well, the carrying cost here is an aggressive payback schedule. The fire truck, for instance, it is common for entities to lease those fire trucks over the life of the fire truck, 10 years. Here, we don't do that. We start with the smallest number possible and see what we can plug into that forecast, and then grow it until we actually can afford it, and then it's there. So usually it's 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Wow. That aggressive debt payback is a big deal. But to answer your question, that's in the works. That's one of the things we want to bring back this summer when we start talking about capital, is how we allocate that cash out. And that includes leases, for that matter, too. We got fire trucks out there we can prepay. We start saving some interest. But we'll start with the highest and work our way down. But that'll also matter as part of that rating conversation. Mayor, that's what I've got on that one.
Any questions? Daniel, you got your question answered? Okay.
I did, thank you.
Can you pull up the attachment for the meeting agenda? It's got the dates on it. The next item is just, it's an option for you guys. And what it is Tracy and I were looking at the rest of the year and when we have these meetings. I've scheduled myself to be down here the second week, or the week of the second meeting, the Board of Aldermen. And so I just want to bring an option to you guys to have this meeting during that week. Some of you have 2 meetings that week, that means. But what it would do is save the city some money. One, you're not paying me for come down here twice. So the way our contract, or monthly, the way it works monthly now is I'm guaranteed to be down here the second week or the second meeting of the month, and then everything else is ad hoc. If I need to come down, Kathy or staff feel like I need to come down, it's good for that. There's value in it, I'll come down. But what this does is put this meeting, the Finance Committee meeting, on the same week of that second Board of Aldermen meeting.
So typically, we have this meeting before the Board of Aldermen meeting, so that anything
That
that
comes through, right?
comes through here. So
Yeah.
now the Board of Aldermen meeting would happen before.
Yeah,
the
and,
finance
and the reason I was okay with this is because a lot of what we do right now in the last 6 months has all been information. So if this body, with the exception of the budget, which is a whole different game, is that the budget needs to be done in unison, this committee with the Board of Aldermen, and we'll continue that process. But the way we've been handling these is a lot of information. And you guys would be able to say thumbs up or thumbs down that the full board needs to hear it. And then that would give us time to put it on that agenda for that next meeting. In the past, budget amendments have come through, contracts have come through, but going with the thought of speed of business is we're going to put information through this committee that we typically wouldn't give to a full board, like what Patrick just did. I can't imagine having most of the city sitting through that same conversation.
Yeah, I
where you
can't
guys-
either.
You guys have a chance of actually getting down in the weeds on some of these issues. I would do the same thing with water and sewer, have them come down and really pull apart what some of these things are. And you guys have the ability to ask questions that others would not otherwise ask. That's one of the reasons, again, we can make it the same. Right now, it's like the third week of the month that this meeting's set up for. And I'm okay with that too. There's no conflict on my part.
So Daniel, we can set policy for whoever else sits in the seat, because it'll change again in April, so.
That's true. So, I mean, I think if it's gonna save the city dollars, I mean, I think we are responsible, especially as a finance committee. If we were another committee, maybe we wouldn't worry so much about it, but we're the finance committee, so I do believe that we need to take advantage of every opportunity to save taxpayer dollars. So if that makes sense,
It makes all the
It
sense.
does make sense, I agree with you, and if there's something major that comes up in our finance committee, then we know it can be tackled at the next alderman meeting in the following month, so.
right,
And if there's anything that's critical or timely,
we schedule it anyway,
we
yeah.
schedule. we
With
can do a-
flexibility in
We can do
scheduling.
a Zoom meeting.
And usually Tracy will put an email out and kind of surveying what your flexibility is, and we'd schedule it that way.
Kathy, you good with this?
Oh, I'm delighted, Mayor.
So let's make it go.
Okay.
Do we need to vote on that?
No, we didn't. Tracy's shaking her
just all
head.
agreed.
No, we'll just
Okay.
plug it in to Hillary's calendar.
Very nice.
I'll just shoot out some calendar invites if everybody's okay with that.
Thank
There
you.
we go. The rest of your packet is the normal financial information. I will not go through that. You can read that at your own bedtime reading. But that's all I got today. It's one of the longest meetings I've had you sit through. But that's all I've got, Mayor.
I appreciate it. Anybody on the committee have any questions? I reviewed these charts that we always go through every month. It's really just saying what we've already said, right? Ben, I appreciate you. If there's no other questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so move.
Seconded.
A motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Ben, thank you.